My name is Sara, and I need to tell you something that will haunt you forever. For 3 years, I cleaned the Montgomery mansion. Every corner, every surface, every inch of that family portrait hanging in the grand hallway. But last Tuesday, while dusting that same painting like I'd done 1,000 times before, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The woman in the portrait, Mrs. Montgomery from 1987, was wearing my grandmother's locket. The exact same one. The one that's been in my family for generations. The one I inherited. The one with the inscription only I should know about. And that's when I realized I wasn't just their maid. I was something else entirely. Something they'd been hiding from me my whole life. Before I tell you what happened next, and trust me, you won't believe where this goes, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below. And if you want to hear more stories that'll keep you up at night, hit that subscribe button. I promise you, nothing I share is ordinary. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Sara, and for 3 years, I've been invisible. Not literally, of course. But when you're a housekeeper in a mansion like the Montgomery estate, you might as well be a ghost. The family walks past you as if you're part of the furniture. They discuss private matters right in front of you, assuming you're too insignificant to matter. And honestly, I was fine with that. I needed the money, the job paid well, and I'd learned early that keeping my head down and my mouth shut was the best way to survive in a world that wasn't built for people like me. I'm 26 years old, and I've been cleaning other people's messes since I was 19. The Montgomery mansion became my prison and my sanctuary 3 years ago when Mrs. Eleanor Montgomery hired me through an agency. I remember that first day, walking through those massive iron gates, staring up to the 3-story Victorian Gothic manor with its pointed towers and dark windows that seemed to watch me like eyes. It looked like something out of a horror movie, all brooding stone and ivy-covered walls. The family itself was just as cold as the architecture. Mr. Richard Montgomery, mid-50s, silver hair, expensive suits, barely acknowledged my existence except to grunt disapproval when something wasn't cleaned to his impossible standards. He moved through the house like a storm cloud, leaving tension in his wake. His wife, Eleanor, was different, quieter. There was a sadness in her eyes, something haunted that I recognized but couldn't name. She was polite to me, almost apologetic, which made her an anomaly in this house. Their daughter, Cecilia, was typical, glued to her phone, treating me like I was part of the decor. But there was one constant in that house that became part of my daily ritual, part of my muscle memory: the portrait. It hung in the main hallway, impossible to miss when you walked from the east wing to the west. A massive oil painting, maybe 5 feet tall, framed in ornate gold that probably cost more than my entire year's salary. The woman in the painting was breathtaking. Dark hair cascading over her shoulders, pale skin, sharp cheekbones, and eyes that seemed to follow you no matter where you stood. She wore a deep burgundy dress, Victorian in style, with delicate lace at the collar, and around her neck hung a locket. The nameplate on the frame read, Catherine Montgomery, 1987. Every single day, for 3 years, I dusted that portrait. It was part of my morning routine. Vacuum the hallway runner, wipe down the side tables, clean the mirror, dust the portrait. My hand would move over the glass in careful circles, my microfiber cloth picking up the thin layer of dust that seemed to accumulate overnight despite the house being sealed tighter than a bank vault. I'd looked at that painting so many times it was burned into my memory. I could close my eyes and see every detail. The way that Catherine's left hand rested on her lap, the tiny beauty mark near her right eye, the subtle smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I'd memorized her face the way you memorize something you see every day, without really seeing it. Until last Tuesday. It was 9:47 in the morning. I remember because I'd checked my phone before putting it in my apron pocket. The house was quiet. Mr. Montgomery had already left for his office downtown, Cecilia was at school, and Mrs. Eleanor was in her study with the door closed. It was just me and the silence and the endless list of tasks that filled my days. I pulled my step stool in front of the portrait, like I'd done 1,000 times before, climbed up with my cloth and spray bottle, and began my routine. Spray, wipe, circular motions, careful around the frame's edges. The morning light coming through the hall windows hit the painting at a different angle than usual, sharper, more direct. That's when I saw it. The locket around Catherine's neck caught the light, and suddenly I could see details I'd never noticed before. The intricate pattern etched into the gold surface, tiny roses intertwined with vines, so detailed the artist must have spent hours capturing each petal. There was a tiny clasp at the side, and near the bottom edge, barely visible, a small scratch that looked like it had been there for years. My hand froze mid-wipe. My heart started beating faster, a drum against my ribs that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet hallway. Because I knew that locket. I knew the exact pattern of those roses. I knew about that tiny scratch, because I'd traced my finger over it hundreds of times. I knew about the clasp, because I'd opened and closed it, looking at the faded photograph inside. I knew it because I owned it. My hand was shaking as I climbed down from the step stool. The cloth fell from my fingers, forgotten. I reached under my shirt collar and pulled out the chain I'd worn every single day since my grandmother's funeral 7 years ago. The only thing she'd left me besides memories I could barely hold on to. The locket swung free, catching the same morning light that illuminated the painting. I held it up next to the portrait. Identical. Not similar or kind of like it. Identical. The same intricate rose pattern, the same delicate vines, the same tiny clasp, the same scratch in the exact same position, like someone had dropped it on a stone floor decades ago and the metal had remembered the impact. "No," I whispered to the empty hallway. No, this isn't possible." But there it was, the evidence right in front of me, undeniable and impossible all at once. My grandmother's locket, the one she'd worn in every photograph I had of her, the one my mother said had been in our family for generations, the one I inherited, the one with the inscription only I should know about. And that's when I realized I wasn't just their maid. I was something else entirely. Something they'd been hiding from me my whole life. My phone buzzed in my pocket, making me jump. A text from Mrs. Eleanor. "Sara, please bring fresh towels to the master bathroom when you have a moment." The normal world intruding on this impossible moment. I looked down at my locket, then back at the painting. My hand was still trembling. Questions flooded my mind, each one more frantic than the last. How did Catherine Montgomery have my grandmother's locket? Did my grandmother know her? Why had no one ever mentioned this? Why was I working in this house of all houses? And the question that sent ice down my spine. What else didn't I know? I tucked my locket back under my shirt, but I could feel it against my skin like a brand, like it was burning with secrets that demanded to be uncovered. The portrait stared down at me, Catherine's eyes holding mysteries I hadn't even known existed until 9 minutes ago. My routine had just shattered, and somehow I knew that nothing in my life would ever be the same. I couldn't sleep that night, or the next, or the one after that. The locket lay on my nightstand in my tiny studio apartment, and I kept turning on the lamp at 2, 3, 4 in the morning just to look at it, to make sure I hadn't imagined the whole thing, to trace that scratch with my fingertip and confirm it was real. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Catherine's painted face staring back at me, her expression knowing, as if she'd been waiting 36 years for me to finally notice. By Thursday, I'd made a decision. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to get them by pretending everything was normal. That morning, I waited until the house was empty. Mr. Montgomery at work, Cecilia at school, Mrs. Eleanor at her weekly garden club meeting. The moment her Mercedes pulled out of the circular driveway, I abandoned my cleaning cart in the kitchen and went straight to the portrait. My hands were steadier now, fueled by determination instead of shock. I pulled out my phone and began photographing everything. Wide shots of the entire painting, close-ups of Catherine's face, extreme close-ups of the locket, zooming in until I could count each painted rose petal. I photographed the nameplate, the frame, even the wall around it, looking for anything I might have missed in 3 years of mindless dusting. Then I did something I'd never done before. I searched the house. Not to clean it, to investigate it. I started with Mr. Montgomery's study, a room I was only allowed to vacuum when he was present. My heart hammered as I slipped inside, closing the door softly behind me. Dark wood paneling, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk with a leather chair that probably cost more than my car. I rifled through drawers, carefully, leaving everything exactly as I found it. Bills, business documents, nothing about Catherine. The library was next. I scanned the shelves for family albums, histories, anything. Most of it was for show, leather-bound classics that had never been opened, their spines uncracked. But on the bottom shelf, hidden behind a row of encyclopedias, I found 3 photo albums. My fingers trembled as I pulled them out. The first 2 were recent: Cecilia's childhood, family vacations to Europe, Christmas cards through the years. But the 3rd album was older, the leather worn and cracked. I opened it, and there she was, Catherine. Not painted, real. Photographed in color that had faded to a dreamy haze. Catherine at a garden party, laughing with a champagne glass in her hand. Catherine standing next to a younger version of Mr. Montgomery, his arm around his waist, both of them smiling like they owned the world. Catherine in that same burgundy dress from the portrait, the locket clearly visible around her neck. I photographed every page, my phone's camera clicking in the silent library like a heartbeat. The last photo in the album made my breath catch. It was a newspaper clipping, yellowed with age, carefully preserved behind a plastic sleeve. The headline read, "Local socialite Catherine Montgomery found dead at 34. The article was dated March 15, 1989, just 2 years after her portrait was painted. I read it 3 times, my eyes devouring every word. Catherine Montgomery, wife of prominent businessman Richard Montgomery, was found deceased in her home yesterday evening. Police report no signs of foul play. Mrs. Montgomery had been missing for 3 days before being discovered by household staff. The family asks for privacy during this difficult time." Missing for 3 days. Found by household staff. No signs of foul play. Something about those words felt wrong, sanitized, like a story that had been carefully edited. I put everything back exactly as I found it and spent the rest of my shift in a daze, my mind racing through possibilities, each one more disturbing than the last. That evening, sitting in my apartment with my laptop open and Chinese takeout growing cold beside me, I fell down a research rabbit hole. I searched Catherine Montgomery death 1989 and found 3 more newspaper articles, all saying essentially the same thing. Tragic accident, beloved socialite, grieving husband. But I also found something else buried in a local history forum, a comment from 6 years ago. Username Truthseeker 1975. My aunt worked for the Montgomerys in the 80s. She always said Catherine's death was suspicious. Police were paid off. That family has secrets. My grandmother's face flashed in my mind. I had so few memories of her. She died when I was 5. A quiet woman with sad eyes and work-worn hands. My mother rarely talked about her, always changing the subject when I asked about her life before I was born. I picked up my phone and called my mother. It was 9:47 p.m. Late, but this couldn't wait. "Sara, what's wrong?" Her voice was thick with concern. "Mom, I need to ask you about Grandma Marie." A pause. Too long. "What about her? Where did she work? Before she had you?" Another pause. I could hear her breathing, could feel her hesitation through the phone line. "Various places, cleaning jobs. Why are you asking this now?" "Mom, did she ever work for a family named Montgomery?" The silence that followed was deafening. It stretched between us like a chasm, filled with things unsaid, secrets buried deliberately. Sara. Her voice had changed, gone sharp and fearful. Don't dig into things that don't concern you. It does concern me. I need to know. No, she cut me off and I heard something in her voice I'd never heard before. Terror. Leave it alone. Your grandmother left that life behind for a reason. Just leave it alone. She hung up. I stared at my phone, my mother's fear echoing in my ears. But instead of scaring me away, it only confirmed what I already suspected. This was bigger than a coincidence. This was intentional, hidden. The next morning, I told Mrs. Eleanor I needed the afternoon off for a family emergency. She agreed without question, probably relieved to have me out of the house for once. I drove to my mother's house 40 minutes away, let myself in with the spare key she kept under the garden gnome, and went straight to the attic. If my mother wouldn't tell me, I'd find out myself. The attic was a graveyard of memories. Boxes of old clothes, broken furniture, Christmas decorations. But in the far corner, covered in a dusty sheet, I found what I was looking for. My grandmother's belongings. I opened the first box, clothes. The second box, kitchen items. The third box, photo albums. My hands shook as I pulled out the first album, flipped it open, and immediately gasped. There in a photograph from what looked like the early 1980s was my grandmother, Marie. She couldn't have been more than 25, wearing a simple black dress and white apron. Her dark hair was pulled back, her face unsmiling but beautiful. And behind her, unmistakable in its Gothic glory, stood the Montgomery mansion. My grandmother had worked there. She'd walked those same hallways I walked. She'd dusted that same portrait. She'd known Catherine. And somehow, she'd ended up with Catherine Locket. I clutched the photograph, tears blurring my vision, as the pieces began to fall into place. Pieces of a puzzle I didn't understand yet, but one I was determined to solve. Because whatever happened in that house in the 1980s, whatever secret my grandmother fled from, whatever truth had been buried with Catherine Montgomery's body, I was going to uncover it. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat on my apartment floor, surrounded by my grandmother's photographs, the locket heavy around my neck, planning my next move. By the time dawn broke through my window, I'd made my decision. I was going to confront Mrs. Eleanor Montgomery. Not Mr. Montgomery. There was something about him that felt dangerous, untouchable, like approaching a live wire. But Eleanor? I'd seen the sadness in her eyes, the way she apologized when she didn't need to, the guilt that seemed to hang around her shoulders like a shawl. If anyone would tell me the truth, it would be her. I just had to catch her alone. Monday morning, I showed up for work with the locket visible outside my uniform shirt, for the first time in 3 years. I wanted her to see it. I needed her to see it. Mr. Montgomery left for his office at 8:15 a.m., as predictable as clockwork. Cecilia's car pulled out at 8:30 a.m., bass thumping loud enough to rattle the windows. And then it was just me and Eleanor in that massive, echoing house. I found her in the sunroom, a glass-enclosed space overlooking the garden, where she spent her mornings drinking Earl Grey tea and pretending her life was something it wasn't. She looked up when I entered, surprise flickering across her face. I never interrupted her during her tea time. "Sara, is everything all right?" My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I reached up and pulled the locket out, holding it so it caught the morning sunlight streaming through the glass. "I need you to tell me about this." Eleanor's teacup froze halfway to her lips. The color drained from her face so quickly, I thought she might faint. Her hand started trembling, and she set the cup down with a clatter that seemed too loud in the sudden silence. "Where did you get that?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "My grandmother left it to me, Marie Santos." She worked here in the 1980s. And this locket, this exact locket, is in the portrait of Catherine Montgomery hanging in your hallway. So I'm going to ask you again, Mrs. Montgomery, what is going on? Eleanor stood up, her movements jerky, panicked. She walked to the sunroom door, checked the hallway, then closed it carefully. When she turned back to me, she looked 10 years older than she had 5 minutes ago. You shouldn't be asking these questions, Sara. But I am asking. My voice was stronger than I felt. Catherine Montgomery wore this locket. My grandmother had it. They're the same. How is that possible? Eleanor wrapped her arms around herself, a defensive posture, like she was trying to hold herself together. How much do you know? I know Catherine died in 1989. I know she went missing for 3 days. I know my grandmother worked here and then disappeared from this life completely, terrified of something. I know there are secrets in this house. I stepped closer. And I think you know what they are. For a long moment, Eleanor just stared at me. Then something broke behind her eyes. A dam of secrets, held too long, pressure that had been building for years. Catherine was Richard's first wife. She began, her voice hollow. They married in 1985. She was beautiful, vibrant, everything this house needed. But Richard, she closed her eyes. Richard is not a good man, Sara. I learned that too late. What happened to Catherine? She wanted to leave him. She'd discovered things about his business, about money he was hiding, illegal dealings. She threatened to go to the authorities. Eleanor's hands twisted together, and Richard couldn't allow that. The sunroom felt colder suddenly, despite the sunlight pouring in. He killed her, I said. It wasn't a question. Eleanor's silence was confirmation enough. A tear slid down her cheek. He made it look like an accident, like she'd fallen down the stairs during one of her episodes. He'd been telling people for months that Catherine was unstable, depressed, that she had been acting erratically, building a narrative. So when she died, everyone believed it was tragic but inevitable. My stomach twisted with nausea. And my grandmother? Marie was Catherine's personal maid. More than that, they were close. Catherine trusted her. Eleanor's voice cracked. Marie was in the house that night. She saw what happened. The room spun. I grabbed the back of a chair to steady myself. She witnessed the murder. Richard caught her watching. He threatened her, told her if she ever said a word, he'd kill her too, kill her family. Marie was young, terrified, pregnant with your mother. Eleanor wiped her eyes. Before Catherine died, she gave Marie the locket. It was supposed to be evidence, proof of something. I don't know what. But Marie was too afraid to use it. She took it and ran, disappeared from this life completely, changed her last name, hid. Why didn't she go to the police? Because Richard Montgomery owns half the police force in this city. Eleanor's voice rose, sharp with decades of suppressed anger. He owns judges, politicians, anyone who could touch him. Marie knew she'd never win. She chose survival. She chose protecting her child. My grandmother had stayed silent to protect my mother. And you? I demanded. You knew all this and you married him anyway? Eleanor's face crumbled. I didn't know. Not at first. I married Richard 5 years after Catherine's death. I thought he was a widower who'd suffered a tragedy. By the time I discovered the truth, by the time I found Catherine's diary hidden in the attic, by the time I pieced together what really happened, it was too late. I was already trapped. You could have left. Could I? She laughed bitterly. You think he'd just let me walk away knowing what I know? I made a choice, Sara, a coward's choice. I stayed silent to stay alive. I felt sick, angry, betrayed by a woman I'd almost felt sorry for. And me? My voice shook. Why am I here? Of all the housekeepers in this city, why did you hire me? Eleanor's eyes widened. I didn't know. I swear, Sara, I didn't know who you were until just now. The agency sent you. I just approved. She stopped, horror dawning on her face. Unless... What? Unless Richard knew. Her whisper was terrified. Unless he's known all along who you are. Unless this was intentional. The floor felt like it was tilting beneath my feet. Mr. Montgomery knew. He'd hired his victim's granddaughter as a maid, kept me close, watched me dust Catherine's portrait every day for 3 years. Why? You need to leave this house. Eleanor grabbed my arm, urgent now. You need to resign today and never come back. No, I pulled away from her. I'm not running like my grandmother did. Sara, you don't understand what he's capable of. I understand perfectly. I clutched the locket around my neck, and I'm not afraid of him. But that was a lie. I was terrified. I just wasn't going to let that stop me anymore. That night, I couldn't stay away from the mansion. I know how that sounds. Reckless, stupid even. Eleanor had begged me to leave, to run like my grandmother had. But something pulled me back to that house after midnight, something I couldn't name or resist. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was the need for closure. Or maybe it was something else entirely. I used my key to let myself in through the service entrance. My heart beat loud in the darkness. The mansion felt different at night, alive in a way it never was during the day, like it had been holding its breath all these years and was finally ready to exhale. My feet carried me to the hallway where the portrait hung, drawn by an invisible thread. The moonlight streaming through the tall windows cast strange shadows across Catherine's painted face. I stood there in the darkness, staring up at her, at the locket around her painted neck, at the eyes that seemed to see right through me. "Who were you really?" I whispered to the portrait. "What do you want from me?" The house was silent, and then it wasn't. A cold breeze swept through the hallway, impossible because all the windows were closed. The temperature dropped so suddenly I could see my breath misting in the air. The moonlight flickered, dimmed, as if something was blocking its path. And then I saw it. The locket in the painting was glowing, not reflecting light, glowing, a soft golden luminescence that pulsed like a heartbeat, growing brighter with each throb. I stumbled backward, my mind trying to rationalize what my eyes were seeing, but rationality had no place here anymore. "Sara!" The voice was soft, feminine, and came from everywhere and nowhere at once. I spun around, searching for the source, but the hallway was empty. "Sara, look at me!" I turned back to the portrait, and my legs nearly gave out. Catherine's eyes were moving, actually moving, tracking me, focusing on my face with an intelligence that no painting should possess. Her painted lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, more like recognition, relief, like she'd been waiting for this moment for 36 years. "You came," she whispered, and her voice seemed to come from inside my head and from the painting simultaneously. "You finally saw. You finally noticed." "This isn't real," I breathed, my back pressed against the opposite wall. "This isn't happening. It's more real than anything you've ever known." The air around the portrait shimmered like heat waves rising from summer asphalt. And then, impossibly, horrifyingly, magnificently, Catherine began to emerge from the canvas. Not fully, not like stepping through a door. It was more like she was caught between two worlds, half painted and half solid, existing in a space that shouldn't exist. Her form rippled and wavered, translucent in the moonlight, but her eyes were solid and dark and alive. "Don't be afraid," she said, though her mouth barely moved. "I won't hurt you. I've been protecting you." "Protecting me?" My voice came out strangled. "From the moment you walked through these doors 3 years ago, I've been watching over you, making sure Richard didn't—" She trailed off, and something dark flickered across her face. "He knows who you are, Sara. He's always known. You're Marie's granddaughter. Her blood. My blood." "Your blood? I don't understand." "Marie wasn't just my maid," Catherine continued, her form solidifying slightly, becoming more real, more present. "She was my half-sister. We shared the same mother but different fathers. My mother had Marie before she married into wealth, before she became respectable. Marie was kept secret, hidden, given away. But I found her. I brought her here. I tried to protect her." The hallways spun. My grandmother and Catherine were sisters, half-sisters, family. "The locket," Catherine continued, drifting closer, her presence filling the air with the scent of roses and something else, something like old books and dust and time itself. "It was our mother's, the only thing she left behind when she died. I wore it always, and when I knew Richard was going to kill me, I gave it to Marie. I told her to run, to save herself and the baby she carried. My mother. Your mother. My niece. You are my blood, Sara. You are the only one left who can finish what I started." "What do you mean?" Catherine's translucent hand reached toward me, not quite touching, but close enough that I felt cold radiating from her palm. "Richard didn't just kill me for threatening to expose his crimes. There was more. Evidence. Documents I'd hidden that proved everything. The money laundering, the bribes, the people he'd destroyed. I documented it all." "Where?" Her smile was sad. "Behind this portrait. Behind me. I had Marie help me create a hollow space in the wall before it happened. Everything is there. The truth. The evidence. But I couldn't reach it. I've been trapped here, bound to this painting, watching him walk past me every day, free, while I remained a prisoner in canvas and frame." "Why? Why are you trapped?" "The painter," Catherine said, her form flickering like a candle flame. "I asked him to paint my portrait with a protection, an old spell, something my mother taught me. I had him mix my blood into the paint. I thought it would keep me safe, give me power. Instead, it bound me here when I died, tied my spirit to this image." Her eyes, sad and ancient and furious, locked onto mine. "But you can free me, Sara. You can take the evidence to the police. You can expose Richard for what he is. You can get justice for both of us, for me, for Marie, for every woman he's destroyed." "How do you free you?" "Remove the portrait from the wall, take the evidence, bring the truth into the light." Her form began to fade, the moonlight growing stronger. "But hurry. Richard knows you're here. He's known you've been asking questions. He's coming." "What do you mean he's coming?" A car door slammed outside. Catherine's eyes went wide with fear, the first time I'd seen fear on her face. "He's here, Sara, run." "No," I said, surprised by the strength in my own voice. "I'm not running. Not anymore." Catherine's fading form seemed to solidify slightly, something like pride flickering across her features. "Then I'll help you," she whispered. "Together, we end this." The front door opened downstairs. Heavy steps echoed through the mansion, and Richard Montgomery began to climb the stairs. Richard Montgomery appeared at the top of the stairs like a storm cloud made flesh. Expensive suit wrinkled, silver hair disheveled, eyes wild with something between rage and fear. In his hand, he held something that glinted in the moonlight. A gun. "I knew you'd be trouble the moment Eleanor hired you," he said, his voice cold and controlled, despite his appearance. "Marie's granddaughter? I should have gotten rid of you the day you walked through my door." My heart hammered, but I didn't move. Beside me, I felt Catherine's presence growing stronger, colder, the air crackling with energy that felt like electricity and fury combined. "You knew who I was," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You've known all along." Of course I knew. He took a step closer, the gun pointed at my chest. "I make it my business to know everything. When I saw your application, Sara Santos, granddaughter of Marie Santos, I knew Marie had finally made a mistake. She'd hidden for decades, but she couldn't hide you forever. I wanted you here, where I could watch you, control you. Why not just kill me?" His smile was cruel. "Because I wanted to see if you'd figure it out. If you were as clever as your grandmother, as dangerous as Catherine." He gestured to the portrait with the gun. "I've been waiting to see if history would repeat itself. And now here we are." History isn't repeating. It's ending. The portrait behind me exploded with light. Catherine's spirit manifested fully, no longer translucent, but solid, real, blazing with supernatural fury. She stood between Richard and me, her form radiating power that made the paintings rattle on the walls and the chandelier above us sway. "You don't get to hurt her." Catherine's voice echoed through the hallway like thunder. "Not this time. Never again." Richard's face went white. His gun hand trembled. "You're dead. You're not real. You're just a painting." "I'm justice, and I've been waiting 36 years for this moment." The air erupted. Objects flew from their places, vases, picture frames, decorative pieces launching themselves at Richard. He stumbled backward, the gun firing wildly, the bullet embedding itself in the ceiling. I ducked, my hands going to the portrait, pulling at the edges with strength I didn't know I possessed. The frame came loose, with a crack like breaking bones. Behind it, exactly as Catherine had said, was a hollow space carved into the wall. Inside, manila folders, photographs, ledgers, everything Catherine had collected before her death. Evidence of every crime, every bribe, every life Richard Montgomery had destroyed. I grabbed it all, shoving papers into my cleaning apron, while the house seemed to come alive around us. Lights flickered, windows rattled. Catherine's spirit swirled through the hallway like a tornado of vengeance, keeping Richard pinned against the wall with invisible force. "Call the police," she commanded. "Now." My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, breathlessly explaining an intruder, a gun, a threat. The operator kept me on the line, promised officers were coming, asked me to stay safe. Richard was screaming now, fighting against the supernatural force holding him, his face purple with rage and terror. "You can't do this. I own this city. I own everyone." "You own nothing," Catherine said softly. "Not anymore." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. The police arrived to find Richard Montgomery restrained by what they'd later describe in their reports as unknown means, ranting about ghosts and dead wives. They found me standing in the hallway, holding decades-old evidence of crimes that would take months to fully investigate. They found Eleanor in her bedroom, finally ready to testify, finally free from fear. And they found the portrait. Catherine's face, serene now, peaceful, her painted eyes no longer tracking movement, but simply gazing forward with something that looked like satisfaction. As they led Richard away in handcuffs, still screaming his innocence, I felt Catherine's presence once last time. A gentle touch on my shoulder, cold but comforting. A whisper in my ear. "Thank you. You broke the cycle. You did what Marie couldn't. You saved us all." When I turned, there was nothing there but the empty portrait frame. In the next 6 months, I watched Richard Montgomery's empire crumble. The evidence was irrefutable. Decades of corruption, money laundering, 2 murders, Catherine's and a business partner who'd threatened to expose him in 1995. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Eleanor divorced him immediately, testified against him, and quietly disappeared to somewhere warm and far away. The mansion was seized as part of the criminal proceedings, but through a bizarre twist of inheritance law, Catherine had never updated her will before her death. It passed to her closest living blood relative, me. I inherited the house where my grandmother had worked, where my great-aunt had died, where secrets had festered for 36 years, and I knew exactly what to do with it. Today, the Montgomery Mansion is the Catherine and Marie House, a shelter for women and children escaping domestic violence. The portrait, restored and reframed, hangs in the entrance hall. Catherine's eyes are peaceful now, finally at rest, watching over the women who walk these halls seeking safety and second chances. I'm not a maid anymore. I'm a director, an advocate, a survivor of a family curse that I helped break. And every time someone asks me how I came to run this place, I smile and say, it started when I was dusting a portrait and noticed something impossible. Sometimes the smallest details change everything. So, that's my story. The portrait, the locket, the ghost, the justice, all of it real, all of it true. I know it sounds impossible, but sometimes the impossible is just the truth waiting to be discovered. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in justice, in breaking cycles, and in the power of women protecting each other across generations, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, drop me a comment telling me what shocked you most, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because stories like mine, they need to be told. Secrets like the Montgomerys, they need to be exposed. And women like Catherine, like Marie, like me, we need to be remembered. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing. And remember, always pay attention to the details. You never know what truth might be hiding in plain sight. Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and never stop dusting those portraits.